This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stockbox interview.
Oscillate plc has begun operations at its hydrogen-focused project in northern Minnesota following the acquisition of a hydrogen soil gas sensors and initial interpretation of gravity, magnetic and topographic data. Well, Steve Sherry, the CEO, and Jack Keys, the project lead for the hydrogen project, are joining us today. Thank you very much both for your time. Steve, first of all, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you, Mark. Nice to see you.
Indeed, and Jack, nice to meet you for the first time. How are you?
I'm good, considering it's very wet here today.
Good. I wonder if we can perhaps start, Jack, with you, because of course the announcement came out very recently from the company that you will not be joining the board. Instead, you'll be taking the role as project lead effectively. So
Right.
Still working very closely with the company, but not actually taking the board position that I think was perhaps originally planned. So I think first of all, perhaps just give some rationale around that and also a bit of an introduction to yourself and what you bring to the company.
Well, several reasons for not joining the board. One are personal reasons. Otherwise, I'm not the corporate type. My forte is the technical side of it. And I really don't want to be distracted because this is a very exacting science that we're getting into. So I think my services would be much more appropriate on the technical side rather than being on the board. Right?
Okay.
My own personal background is oil and gas. I've been in the oil and gas exploration business for over 40 years, mainly international. And circumstances came by where somebody asked me would I be particularly interested in hydrogen. And I looked around the world as to where the particular type of geological formations occurred. And one of the most interesting I came up with was in the Iron Range in northern Minnesota. So we made the appropriate moves to find out who had what where, and we acquired a rather substantial piece of acreage in that area, otherwise known as the Anamiki Basin. Right?
Excellent. So you'll be leading on this project then with your technical expertise. And just
Well,
on
I'll
natural...
be the puppet master. The exploration for hydrogen is a little bit more sophisticated than your normal natural gas processes. A lot of it is driven by the geochemical alterations of the formations in question. So one of the main players will be on the geochemistry side of it. Then you have somebody who will be involved in the geophysics as well as the minerals and the land ownership. So it's a combination of various disciplines that are going to be involved, and I'll be the one that will pull them all together. Right?
Okay. And natural hydrogen then, what's happening globally on this scene? Because of course, synthesized hydrogen or made hydrogen through electrolysis is perhaps a normal or more understood way to get hydrogen for, of course, the growing industry and the green revolution. But how does natural hydrogen fit into this picture?
Well, to answer that, we never really looked for natural hydrogen. It's been occurring all the time, but nobody took much notice of it until we decided that the industry and everybody needs to reduce their carbon footprint. And then we became aware of a discovery. Well, the main advantage to the hydrogen is when you burn it, the only byproduct is water. There's no carbon involved in burning hydrogen. So you've got a source of energy that's carbon neutral. And there was a discovery in Central Africa several years ago in a country called Mali, and it's been producing natural hydrogen for 7 years and being used to generate electricity. So people in general started to look for this hydrogen. So we started to look in the United States. There are projects in the Middle East. There are projects in Europe. And bit by bit, people are starting to look at Africa. Australia has got quite a following in the hydrogen world as well. Nothing at this stage, to my knowledge, in Latin America. Right? It requires a very specific type of geological formations to generate natural hydrogen. And there are several, but the one that we think that will generate it from a commercial perspective is the iron formation, the change in the iron formation. You also have natural radioactivity will generate hydrogen, several other more sophisticated processes, which I really don't want to go into, but it is out there, but it's a question of finding it. The hydrogen industry today is similar to what the oil industry was in 1900. This is the general comments. Right?
Okay. So yeah, so very much in its infancy. So
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, and you talk about the Iron Range then in Minnesota, a good place to be to look for it. So I mean, how do you go about, and how does Oscillate as a company, and you responsible for that, go about finding if it's there? What does it look like to actually explore for hydrogen and prove up an economic resource?
The exploration is fairly well much the same as it is if we were looking for natural gas. We have the initial work, which is before we go to the field. We look at what's available geologically wise. There's been quite a bit of work done in Minnesota by the mining companies because the area is a huge producer of iron ore. So we look at the information that the mining companies have contributed. Then you have a lot of independent geological studies put together by various institutions, whether it's the government or the universities. And then we know that hydrogen, like natural gas, can seep out of the ground. It's a very, very small molecule and it moves very quickly. So what we do is we evaluate the regional geology and then we make a decision. We're going to go up with a hydrogen sensor and we're going to see, based on our knowledge of the geology, is there anywhere that it could be leaking? If it doesn't leak, it doesn't mean that it's not there. It just means that the sealing facies sitting on the surface are a lot tighter than we expected. Now, places like Minnesota in the winter, you're going to get some frost, some snow, which is good because that can trap the hydrogen underneath it and give us some very interesting indications. But basically, it's a combination of how this area was deposited way back in the early time when the Earth was first formed. So it's very, very old and it hasn't been geologically active for millions and millions of years. So it's a good place for the hydrogen to accumulate. And the other thing, of course, is absolutely necessary is for us to study the regional water. Because what happens with the hydrogen, there's a chemical reaction that breaks down the water and releases the hydrogen and oxygen. So without water, we have no hydrogen.
Okay. So in terms of getting started and looking for this on the ground then, are you working at the minute on the desktop, I believe? So what does it look like in terms of translating that work and actually getting into the field and starting some work on the ground?
Well, there's several disciplines move at the same time. First of all, in the United States, individuals own the surface rights. It's not like any other, and the mineral rights. So we have area that has where the landowner has, in some cases, has the surface rights, in some cases has the mineral rights, in some cases has both. So for me to go to Minnesota and to go across somebody's land, we need to get written permission. That will take time. All the landowners have to be contacted individually. Okay. Certain areas, the state of Minnesota will own the surface rights, and in certain areas, they're owned by the federal government. So that goes parallel with the geological work, where we come up with an area, well, where do we start to look? And then it gets a little bit esoteric. We look where we think that these deep-seated faults would act as a migration pathway for the hydrogen to leak to the surface. A combination of the faults and the land position will enable us to identify where exactly we start to look.
Okay.
We have a hydrogen sensor. We're working with that, familiarizing ourselves with the technology. There's not many of them out there, so it's very, very new technology.
And Steve, I mean, how do you feel then now that you've got, of course, this land package secured? You're in hydrogen, natural hydrogen, a very new commodity, not something that would be very common, certainly on a mining front, but also just from an investing point of view. You've now got the project secure. Of course, you've got to go through, do that desktop work, as Jack said, get the surface rights, get the mineral rights secured as to where you want to get on the ground and start doing work. But yeah, how are you feeling about getting this project really started?
Yeah, realistically, from my point of view, Mark, I mean, we've got ourselves in an enviable position. And of course, like in all things in this world, experience will pay us back in, tenfold. So, Jack, I don't think there's a lot more experience we could have gained from a partner in this project. So for Jack to be able to orchestrate the work, draw on all of his experience and also his contact base, that is appropriate when, you're dealing with, this type of pioneering venture. But for Jack onboarded with our project, I think it brings the best opportunity we could probably have. So, the first thing he did in that sense was he's been extremely smart in procuring this level of land package. It's an enviable position. And of course, now we've got it, we're drawing on him and we're pulling on him to pull all of this program together for us. So for me, it's really exciting because, for myself and John Tracy, we're bringing the corporate activity of our business, and we're trying to make sure that we're matching the pace that Jack's able to achieve operationally, because we've spoken to investors and we've set forward our plans, and we feel that at the right point in this project, we will, migrate onto a different exchange. So for me, I've been speaking with Nomads. I've been looking at all of our corporate activities and us as a business to make sure that our staging is absolutely perfect. Because if we're lucky enough to find this and we find it in a commercial form, then it's going to be it's going to be a life changer for our business. And of course, it's going to bring further levels of complexity. We couldn't be better placed. And the determination and energy that I've got to want to deliver for shareholders, really is, brings me a huge amount of excitement in what we can potentially deliver. And of course, for my part, I've got to make sure that I can hold pace with where Jack is, because his experience means that we're not going to miss any steps, and we're going to have the best opportunity possible. So it's exciting. And, just listening to the man, which I've now done through engagement over the last few months, a huge amount of respect for, what he is able to provide for our business. So it's exciting in that sense, Mark.
Good to hear. Well, it sounds like you certainly got the man for the job, and he knows what he's doing, and the plans are in the works. When do you think you can communicate those plans, Steve, to the market?
Well, I think, to be honest, Mark, what's coming together now, we're 9 days into, the start of our active work program, where we've promulgated that we've started work. So now we're starting to see things that are outputting from these different desktops and scenarios. And, behind closed doors at the corporate level, we're starting to dovetail things, into our program. We're not ready to communicate it specifically today, but it doesn't mean that we won't be ready to, communicate that tomorrow. And I think this is the part that I'm not only bringing in, from mine and John's, area of expertise, but also we're drawing upon Ian Stalker and Neil Herbert. These are our advisors. And between us all, we're making calculated steps to make sure that we're able to deliver effectively. So, we have weekly meetings, we have daily engagement, and everyone is onboarded here. And I think ultimately what we're doing is we're providing that level of support that will give Jack the best opportunity to go and deliver in the field, because that's really what this is about.
Well, thank you both very much for your time, Steve Sherry, the CEO, and Jack Keys, the project lead at Oscillate PLC.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like, or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter, and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.